It's been more than 10 years now since their debut, and we are onto BABYMETAL's 5th studio album, so it's safe to say that at this point, anyone who dismissed the band in the early days of being a gimmick that will never last and fade out into nothingness has been proven categorically wrong at this point. However, just because you can make 5 albums in 11 years' time doesn't necessarily mean that you should. So is the novelty still strong? Have BABYMETAL still got the goods, or have changing trends and pop culture differentials only strengthened their hold on the emerging fanbase of new heavy metal fans? Guys, gals, and non-binary pals, my name is Ian, this is Rhyme Signatures, and we are once again opening the lid on the best new releases in prog, rock, and metal. Okay, credentials time, I guess. I love BABYMETAL, okay, unironically. I've been a huge fan of them since their self-titled album dropped back in 2014. It caught me off guard just enough for me to enjoy the absolute absurdity of super cutesy anime opening theme vocals paired with 8-string chugging riffs and blast beats that lay underneath it. But, like so many people, I assumed this was going to be a flash-in-the-pan experiment that you would end up showing to people just to watch their faces as confusion kicks in and then either revulsion or delight, depending on who you showed it to. But BABYMETAL persisted, with Metal Resistance, Metal Galaxy, and the other one, managing to demonstrate the fact that this was not just some joke or cheap novelty. There was some serious musicianship going on behind the aesthetics. The hooks were catchy, the grooves were infectious, and it was difficult to put on a BABYMETAL record and sit still. Sold-out stadium shows, endorsements from some of the biggest names in metal, and millions upon millions of monthly listeners on streaming platforms were indicating something unavoidable. BABYMETAL was becoming one of the faces of modern metal. So, love them or hate them, it's impossible to ignore them. And this once dismissed novelty band has grown now to the point where it is shaping tastes. It is the gateway band for younger people getting into heavy metal. With bands like Ghost, Sleep Token, and Bring Me the Horizon also thrown into the mix, we're seeing the landscape shift and pivot towards an evolving and dynamic fanbase. But the big question is, just how much longer and how much further can this ship sail? Is 5 albums one too many, or are BABYMETAL finally evolving into their next form? From the first synth-laden notes of From Me to You, with a strong feature by Poppy on vocals, the album wastes no time in throwing you headlong into its high-gloss theatricalities. This is still absolutely the same band that you either loved or hated when you were first exposed to them, but there is a certain feeling of maturity to the sound, and while that might just be down to the fact that Sue Metal is now 27 years old, and understandably her voice has changed quite a lot since 2014, it's richer, it's broader in its range, and demonstrates a great deal more variety in her inflections. Her English vocals have definitely stepped up a notch too, but I do still prefer the songs where the band rocks out in their native Japanese. Now, we are given 4 songs in a row with prominent guest features from some of the more popular bands in modern metal. And while I certainly enjoy Poppy, Bloodywood, and to a lesser degree Electric Callboy's appearances, the fact that there is a whole-ass song with Slaughter to Prevail on it leaves me with a bit of a gross taste in my mouth, and it does sour the opening salvo of the record. Lucky for me, the ability to skip tracks exists, and I can continue to live a life that remains clear of Alex Terrible, and that's the last I'm going to say about this god-awful band in this review. But speaking of features, we can't really avoid talking more about this. 70% of the tracks here have a feature. There's only 3 songs out of the 10 that are credited as just BABYMETAL, and honestly, some of them are the worst tracks on the album, which frankly feels a little concerning as far as the band's future is concerned. There's also the fact that these features end up feeling more like the band or individual involved is having more or less full creative control. Con Con feels straight up like a Bloodywood song, as My Queen feels like a Spirit Box one. And while this isn't necessarily a bad thing, these tracks are extremely catchy and amongst my favourites on the album, it does carry on the feeling that this is a compilation album featuring Baby Metal, rather than a Baby Metal album featuring a select few contributors. This does, of course, end up with a record that feels oddly disconnected from the band I've been enjoying up until this point, almost like we're now facing the question of who on earth is this album even for? The casual Baby Metal fans will no doubt lap this up. There's still plenty of excellent riffing on display, some catchy vocal harmonization, and grooves that will sit in your head for weeks to come, but nothing feels iconic. Tracks from earlier albums like the classic Gimme Chocolate from their self-titled, Karate from Metal Resistance, or Papaya from Metal Galaxy, I feel have stood the test of time as certified bangers. But Metal Fourth just doesn't have that kind of X factor. Every song just sort of exists and transitions from one to the other without any kind of central flow or connective tissue, feeling like a collective grab bag of ideas just thrown into a cocktail shaker and poured over whatever popular artist they could snag to collaborate with them. This is also the shortest Baby Metal album to date, at an extremely brief 35 minutes and 30 seconds long. And while I'm sure there are a lot of you out there who would call that still 35 minutes too long, I feel like the album's over and done with before it even gets a chance to spread its wings. Due to the, frankly, overwhelming number of extensive features on the album, the final track of White Flame feels like the album is just getting started. We've trudged through all of these songs that have Baby Metal's personality and charm kind of repressed by the featured artists, that we're left with just a tiny morsel of the band standing on their own 2 feet before it shuts down and the record ends, without ever really showing us who the band have become in the years since the other one. Look, okay, I get it. I have been pretty negative in this review, and this is certainly a far cry from how I felt about their previous album back when I reviewed that one on the channel. But I guess these frustrations are coming from the perspective of someone who has taken a certain degree of pride in watching what could have been a cheap novelty band evolve into one of the most powerful and commanding voices on the modern metal stage. This record feels more like an experiment than a true step forward into their next stage of evolution. The sheer number of other artists lending their voices to this record has diluted the feel and sound of Metal Fourth to the point where it's difficult to pinpoint this even being a Baby Metal album outside of a few tracks and a few select moments. You add too much outside influence or flavour to a winning recipe and it no longer feels like what it once was. And bear with me with this one, I can't help but describe Metal Fourth as the Fortnite of modern heavy metal. It's popular, it's an explosion of colour and intrigue, but there's so much influence and contribution from people outside of what made it so enjoyable in the first ruddy place that it's becoming incredibly hard to figure out just who this is for. So, what else can I possibly say about Baby Metal's Metal Fourth? Look, I don't exactly know what I was expecting going into this album. We're 5 records deep into a band that a lot of people didn't think would live past their sophomore, but they're more popular than ever, which means ultimately this review is kind of meaningless. People will still love this unreservedly. People will still hate this unreservedly. And then you've got folks like little old me, who've been with the band since day one, but feel that this album is just a bit of a speed bump in the increasing acceleration of the band. Now look, I don't hate this album, far from it. There's moments here I absolutely love. It just feels, disjointed and disconnected from what I've come to understand from the band. It's a frustratingly competent record, but it never ever moves beyond that. There's clearly more to be said from this band as they emerge from the constraints of their novelty, but this isn't the record to showcase it. I am confident that if we get a 6th album, we will see Baby Metal standing tall and proud as their own thing, and they will continue their meteoric rise to the absolute top of the mountain. But until then, I would ultimately recommend giving this one a stream. It's not bad, it's just a little frustrating in places. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion, so if you loved this one, if you hated this one, please talk to me about your experiences with the album in the comments down below. Please do drop me a thumbs up if you like the video, please do tell your friends about little old me, and please do consider subscribing to the channel if you've been enjoying my content so far. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.